got to buy jelly at Walmart, and they were out of jelly.
Oh gosh.
A lot of people had stocked up on the necessary essentials. Obviously, bread, water were missing, but in the South, we like our peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, and there was very little peanut butter and absolutely no grape jelly left. So I do have sugar in me, and I think you can tell that from this response.
You definitely can. Is that you pointing out the center on that radar there? I can't quite tell.
No, that is someone else.
Someone else? Oh.
That's not me.
Okay then. That's interesting. Thomas, what's going on? There's another look at that convection flare-up that you can see there. Looks quite impressive. Like you could, you know, it. Yeah, I can definitely see hurricane status being called on the weight of that.
I can too. It's just Barry's really started to flare, and it's really starting to do what wasn't really expected of it to do because we didn't think it was going to have enough time. The core is condensing. It's getting quite small, kind of like we expected it to be originally. The field of convection is very large at this point. You know, we were saying it wasn't going to be an overly large storm. That doesn't seem to be the case. When it comes to the convective field, but it looks like the field itself, where the convection is probably going to be, and where those tropical storm force and hurricane force winds are going to be, is going to be relatively small. And with the smaller core, intensification could also occur. And with that, assuming this convective flare-up stays, which it looks like it might, this could be stronger than a Category 1. Well, stronger than weak Category 1. It won't get stronger than a Category 1, I don't think.
No.
But it could get to maybe 80, 85 miles an hour. 85 if we're being really generous. But 80 miles an hour, especially if they upgrade it to 75 here, doesn't sound like that far of a stretch.
Can I just cut in and ask Thomas, where you've got the pen, am I right to say that there's a little bit of light appearing just slightly to the left of where you've got your pen? Just
Hold on,
around
where's
there.
his pen?
I don't know. Here's the pen on the screen for everyone.
Well, your cursor.
I circled this stuff. I think he's talking about the white kind of flare up here when I was talking about.
Robbie, right. Go on.
Yeah, I mean, there's still some reminiscent signs of the old convective flare-up.
And that's minus 80 cloud tops right there.
That's what I'm thinking, Nathan. The cloud top. Because I can see, I'm just looking at the feed. And, there's a bit of light there. Yeah. Just where you've drawn the circle.
Yeah, I mean, you can see the flares. Yeah, I mean, it's really looking good cloud tops wise, and I mean, to say that hurricane status is not where this is at, I'm not sure what you can really say about it at this point. I'm loading up some radar imagery right now. I'm going to go to a few and see if I find sustained hurricane force winds. And to my knowledge, I am kind of starting to really find more and more places where I can say there's sustained hurricane force winds on radar. And of course, that's above the ground. So you can't say that at the surface it's there, maybe deduct 3-4 miles an hour.
This convective burst is incredibly impressive right now.
Yes.
On my screen here, I'm very impressed, and if that's over the center, then I think we might be calling this a hurricane.
It's definitely over the mid-level center, and probably a surface level center from there, but there's another area of lower pressure. I personally would give it hurricane status at this point.
I'm going to lend support to Thomas's position.
it's going to be very interesting to see what the National Hurricane Center do at their update. If they're early, we could see it in half an hour. If not, then within the hour.
Certainly, and they've been going with 65 for a very long time. I'd be very intrigued if they still go with 65, which I doubt at this point.
Why is the central pressure dropping? And noting that it's been the same for how many hours? 993.
Well, I think it is now.
Well, do we even know if hurricane hunters are in there? I don't know. I know you're not getting data right now, but do we know their actual status?
No, we don't.
Oh.
But, yeah, we have nothing.
But typically they fly in there, they're doing it 24/7, aren't they?
Pretty much.
So, so surely they aren't finding any lower pressures yet because they would have changed it in their updates.
Yeah, and I personally think what I said at the beginning of this stream, at the end of the last one, when the convection was starting to wrap around, people were asking, it looks better, why isn't the pressure lowering? And it was the kind of thing where storms, they have to, once they hit a certain barrier, they have to organize more first before they can start to deepen. And I know this probably isn't the best example, and don't draw up any comparisons, but Irma, for example, hit this kind of stone wall where it had been fluctuating between category 2 and 3 because it couldn't get itself organized enough to continue intensification. It wouldn't really deepen. So it was the kind of thing where it had to continue to organize before it could continue deepening, and that's what's going on here. The appearance is improving, but in order for it to deepen, it needs to get further organized first, and I think it's done then.
Nathan, just to mention the hurricane hunters, it looks like the next scheduled flight is at 11:30 Zulu, which would be
3 hours.
3 hours from now, yes.
So for the time being, we don't know what's going on then after all. So that is interesting. I wonder whether they might make the call just based off satellite. Any buoy information?
It's actually a really good question. Let me check.
I was just thinking about that. Nelson?
Thomas just said he was checking. Why is it always me on the buoys? I'll be back with you in a minute.
Well, you're pretty good at digging up that information from previous experience with you.
Yeah,
what provides a website?
Just to remind people as well, in northeastern Nebraska, severe thunderstorm warning in effect there until 3:30.
I'm seeing gusts up to like 66 from like 15-minute updates as of like 15 minutes ago or so, but these observations aren't fantastic. I'm using windy.com.
Miles per hour or not?
That's the source I know. It's miles per hour, so you can see them here, but it's
because I'm sorry, source. Thomas. I've got a station SPLL1, the South Timberler Block 52, located at 28.867 north, 90.483 west. It's,
hold on, say that again.
28.867 north, 90.483 west.
Okay.
The anemometer height is 10 millimeters. Jesus, I'm meters. Still not good. 10 meters above sight elevation. Wind speeds 52.1 knots.
That's fascinating because it's 77 miles from the center of, or what we think the center of the storm is. And that was, what was it again, 60 miles an hour?
Oh, God. 52 knots, so roughly 60 miles an hour.
77 miles from what we think the center of the storm is right now, so that is very interesting too.
It's impressive, to say the least. And it means one of two things. Either the winds at the center are more intense than we think they are at 75 miles per hour, or the center, the wind field is very broad. It looks like the hurricane center is leaning towards the wind field being a broader one, and I think that I'd have to lean in general agreement of that. But is there a chance that the center could be deeper than we think it is?
Yes.
And if so, how deep would we think it could get? Because I mean, at this point, it's all fair game with how small it looks like the central core of the storm itself is within that envelope of convection. I mean, we've seen storms that are this small just intensify in the snap of a finger. So I mean, how rapidly do we think this could deepen?
I mean, is it that small though? We're talking about wind radius here, 150 nautical miles in the southeast, 70 the lowest in the northwest. Obviously not the biggest, but certainly far from being one of the smallest.
I just think it's small enough to be conducive if the storm can get over the sheer of faster deepening.
Well, it looks like it has.
Well, yeah, but I mean, like, could it really intensify to a very rapid extent?
We are at the point of watching this imagery very, very closely to see what happens with this latest flare-up, because you are seeing a little depression there. It could be a consequence of that convective flare-up. It could possibly be an eye structure, but we'll wait and see what actually happens with that. I'm thinking the former at the minute.
Nathan, I've posted into the chat a graphic from the Fleet Weather Center. We use the JTWC in some instances in the Pacific. Fleet Weather Center, again, is part of the U.S. Navy. It does show 64 knot winds, or at least 50 knot winds. It's a very small graphic over Terrebonne Parish, Lafourche Parish, and Dahoma, but it does show a good wind radii for the storm right now.
Even into Texas, potentially.
Well, I do believe that is the cone of uncertainty, which is a bit ridiculous, I will admit.
No, the wind radii there. Look, the left-hand side extending across the
Beaumont.
border. But the National Hurricane Center saying just a 25% at where was it? The first point you get to in Texas, pretty much.
That would be Orange on I-10. Beaumont is the bigger city.
Port Arthur, Texas, 25% chance of tropical storm force winds. And you can see all of those chances on the left-hand side of our screen right now as we look at it there.
And Houston's in a cone of uncertainty.
Oh no. David, don't go there.
Yeah, David, I think we should wake up Isaac.
Yeah.
If you've got any comments or questions for us whilst we're on the air right now, these are, I mean, our team is doing an excellent job with the updating. We've been on the air for 11 and a bit hours. It's only my third hour. I've been resting up, preparing for these hours of coverage. But if you do have any questions, start your message with Force 13 all in text. That is not true, Nelson. And there we are. Thomas with the latest imagery.
Yeah, and I feel like talked about it a good bit here, but we could keep ourselves composed. That would be great. So
We are.
Good.
You're the one talking, bud.
And I'm just hearing a little bit of laughter.
You must have been hearing things.
Yeah, maybe, perhaps. But you can see the convective flare-up, and I'm really starting to notice this very pronounced, I guess, outward stretch of convection from where the center is. And I mean that an increase in size and could also indicate that increase in intensity. And I think that here relatively soon my voice is going to leave us, and that means that my talking might get a lot quieter, so I do apologize if that happens in the near future. But
that bad?
I mean, it doesn't feel bad. It just I just hear it sounding worse and worse with time. So
all right, let's go back to the satellite imagery that I'm presenting right now. And again, those huge cloud tops right now. Let's see if we can find out what the deepest cloud top is there, protruding from the southern side. Minus 84 Celsius. So that is a very deep cloud top right now, probably the highest that we've seen during this storm. Let's also see if we can load water vapor imagery. It's not fully loaded, so the answer to that is no, I'm afraid. So we'll stick with the enhanced infrared here. Let's reiterate some warnings now as we switch back over to Thomas's screen. Just a reminder of what warnings we have currently in effect. This information may change in the next 45 minutes. A hurricane warning is in effect for Intracoastal City to Grand Isle. A tropical storm warning for the mouth of the Pearl River to Grand Isle, Lake Pontchartrain, and Lake Maurepas, including metropolitan New Orleans. This is that old information? I'm sorry, let me get the latest advisory up, even though it hasn't changed, just to make doubly sure. A storm surge warning for Intracoastal City to Biloxi and Lake Pontchartrain, and a storm surge watch for Biloxi to the Mississippi-Alabama border. A hurricane watch for the mouth of the Mississippi River to Grand Isle and Intracoastal City to Cameron. A tropical storm watch for east of the mouth of the Pearl River to the Mississippi-Alabama border. Don't forget, a hurricane warning means that hurricane conditions are expected somewhere within that warning area. A warning is typically issued 36 hours before the anticipated first occurrence of tropical storm force winds. Obviously, they're already occurring in some areas, we anticipate. A tropical storm warning means that tropical storm conditions are expected somewhere within that warning area within 36 hours. That also becomes important inland because some inland counties also have tropical storm warnings in effect. A storm surge warning means that there's a danger of life-threatening inundation from rising water moving inland from the coastline during the next 36 hours. It's a life-threatening situation if you are in a storm surge warning. A storm surge watch means there's a possibility of life-threatening inundation from rising waters in the next 48 hours. And obviously the same too goes for the hurricane watch and the tropical storm watch. Reminder of those storm surge totals. Intracoastal City to Shell Beach to expect 3 to 6 feet of surge. Shell Beach to Biloxi 3 to 5 feet. Lake Pontchartrain 3 to 5 feet. Biloxi to the Mississippi-Alabama border 2 to 4 feet. And Lake Maurepas 1 to 3 feet. A storm surge of 2.7 feet has already been recorded. Rainfall, we could reach 25 inches in some areas. We're expecting at the minute a further 12 inches of rain. That's 1 foot in New Orleans, which is, I think, the highest out of all of the major towns and cities on our list. Another look at that satellite imagery there provided by Thomas. Another great visualization of that flare-up. That big convective burst that's occurred in the last hour or so here.
Yeah, it is a good, I think, a good representation. I know you were asking for water vapor imagery, so here's your lower level water vapor. You'll notice the dry air to the north, but you'll notice Barry is starting to really have its own barrier, if you will, between itself and the dry air. And this is something with hurricanes. As they get stronger, they have more influence on their environment instead of the environment influencing them. They influence the environment, and that's what Barry is starting to become capable of doing. And you don't normally see stuff like this unless you have a bona fide center of circulation, and you're really starting to see it strengthen. You don't normally see this until you start getting into the weak to mid hurricane range. So, I mean, that's already right there some evidence to indicate this is a strong tropical storm to a hurricane. And I think that there's strong enough evidence, at least in my opinion, to call it a hurricane at this point.
And I'm pretty much inclined to agree. Very interesting situation that is developing right now with this flare-up. It's continuing. We are looking at this minute by minute, and again you can see a little depression there in the northwestern side of that convective flare-up. We still don't know yet whether that could be an eye or whether it's just a result of the convection. Usually when it does blow up like that, there is a little depression. You can notice that just in that other tiny flare-up that's occurring southwest of the main storm itself. That one. You can see also a little depression there too, so it does happen in most of these flare-ups. So it's too early to tell whether this is a potential eye that we're looking at. Let's see latest radar, Nelson. First of all, looking at these thunderstorms moving in, but after we talk about this, I'd like you to show us the center of the storm too.
Okay, we still have these storms moving in over Dauphin Island, Bayou La Batre, heading into downtown Mobile. This line is headed pretty much due north. There are some cells that look shifted to the east, but the rotation of the storm, I think they may go over the center of the bay, even impacting the western side, which is Mobile, Saraland, possibly even far enough east to get to Bay Minette. If we move out from New Orleans, we would see, I guess, the center of circulation around here, which is, let me see, from radar, 146 miles to the southwest of Slidell, really just about due south of New Iberia, maybe a little to the southeast of New Iberia, is my best guess on this radar imagery of where the center of circulation may be.
This is interesting, Nelson, because the radar center estimate is about 13 miles away from the satellite center estimate.
And again, we are at this point where the mouse button is. If you'll permit me a brief excursion, I might switch to the Lake Charles radar, which I have to do, unfortunately, very manually.
There it goes.
So we've switched there, probably about here, 103 nautical miles southwest of Slidell. Probably a little bit further west than the New Orleans radar was showing. What would you say in terms of mileage that is?
Now, just a minute. Looking at that rotation, it would appear that the storm is now due south of Marsh Island.
Yes, I would agree with that.
And that means it might miss and go west of Marsh Island, which is Oh dear, we don't want it to go west.
Well,
We don't want it to go west. That would put Lafayette under the gun.
More time for intensification.
And unfortunately, that looks probable.
So, if looking at that radar, which is more reliable than satellite, that puts the storm roughly 71 miles or 72 miles southwest of Morgan City, 93 miles due south of Lafayette now. So, you know, at worst case here, hurricane force winds could be possible at Lafayette.
Nathan, I just want to draw your attention to a comment from a viewer on the US stream.
Yes.
He lives in that place, and we're getting some gusts here around 30 miles per hour, and it's only going to get crazier.
Yes. This is an interesting development, folks, that could change the complexion of the next 12 to 24 hours.
I would like to... Oh, sorry, Thomas.
It's all good, go on.
I'd like to mention a public information statement given by the National Weather Service, New Orleans. It's located in Slidell. It comprises New Orleans and Baton Rouge, but it has the highest wind reports from the past 3 hours ending at 3 a.m. Central Time. Duloc, 64 miles an hour. Port Fourchon, 62. Houma Terrebonne Airport, 58. Pascagoula, Mississippi, 52. East Bay, 50. Petit Bois Island, Port of Pascagoula, 47. Bayou Bienvenue, 47. Bayou Gauche, 46. Houma, 46. New Orleans International Airport, 46. New Orleans Lakefront Airport, 46. The Lake Pontchartrain Causeway, 44. And Gulfport, Mississippi, 40.
That's
all
wind
of
speeds
those
in miles per hour, is it?
That is wind speeds in miles per hour. All of those were recorded on today, the 13th, except for the Gulfport, which was 11:35 on the 12th, 11:35 p.m. that is. Bayou Bienvenue, 11:56 p.m. And Port Fourchon, which had its highest wind speed of 62 miles per hour, 7:35 p.m. yesterday, almost 8 hours ago.
Nelson, we're back after this. Making its infamous landfall, Hurricane Michael is still a Category 3 as it enters the state of Georgia. Force 13 live. It's 3:30 Central Time on the coast of Louisiana. Ahead of Tropical Storm Barry, which could be stronger. By that we mean, looking at that latest flare-up, there is some potential evidence for hurricane status. I'll just repeat that because I think we went down just for a minute there.
Yes.
There is some evidence that that could be a hurricane that we're looking at right now. The National Hurricane Center will be updating shortly, and as soon as that update comes in, we'll let you know. Who would like to take the floor now?
Nelson.
Of course. Doesn't matter.
I don't know what's so funny about that. I am in New Orleans.
Should I take the floor? It doesn't matter to me. What do you want to do?
Go on then, Nelson.
Anyways, I'm in New Orleans right now. Currently in New Orleans, we are still in a dry slot. There are storms moving north into Pascagoula, Mobile, Dauphin Island, Ship Island, Cat Island. Some lighter precipitation in Gulfport. A line of storms is moving through Baton Rouge right now. We'll be heading towards New Roads and Clinton. The center of tropical storm as we know it right now, we will get an update in about 25 minutes. Tropical storm Barry is off the coast of Louisiana, south of New Iberia and the Atchafalaya Vermilion Bay area. Beyond that, we have seen some high convection appearing on the storm and infrared radar. And David, what would you like to mention?
Well, considering I'm here on the East Coast at 6:34, but I
The
believe
East
that
Coast of Australia, that is, folks, not the United States.
sorry, Nelson was putting me off my question. However, more seriously, people are losing power in Louisiana. Nelson, you got any update on that?
He might actually have an update
I
on
will
that.
have. I will have in a moment. I do know that Grand Isle has been without power for probably 9 hours at this point. 2,800 Entergy customers. There is only one road in and out of Grand Isle. It's Louisiana Highway 1. It has been flooded over since about 7 o'clock last night. Now that winds are picking up, federal regulations will require that linemen stay on the ground. I believe the winds have to be under 30 knots before they can work on transmission lines. So in addition to the inaccessibility due to water, they are now delayed by federal regulations, and so anyone that stayed on Grand Isle hopefully has a proper plan for being without power. Otherwise, we hope they've evacuated at this time, but I will be checking Energy and Clico's websites to give a more detailed update on current power outages.
Now, with the storm moving a little bit further west, do you think conditions might start improving there today? Or is the worst still yet to come?
I think based on the infrared imagery, the convection on the east side of the storm to the southern side of the storm, I can say that I think it's going to improve. I think that the area of precipitation, it may not be as strong in some areas like metropolitan New Orleans, but the wind field is certainly quite large, at least the tropical storm wind field. And there are going to be other areas, other higher priority areas, when you look at cities like Lafayette, which may be under the gun for hurricane force winds, hospitals, things like that. Grand Isle doesn't have hospitals. It's a fishing community. It's a community where people go to live life on their own. But there aren't that many services. I think in the bigger cities with more services, that is going to be a priority for the restoration of power.
We did initially have it down for a potential landfall zone, Grand Isle. That hasn't occurred. Obviously, the storm has moved way further west, and it looks like it might overshoot Marsh Island as well now. because the center of what appears to be the circulation on radar here has it due south of there right now and still moving west-northwest. So we could be looking more of a landfall closer to Cameron, Louisiana.
Yeah, and I mean, I honestly think that this westward trend may continue for quite a while, and the reason is because if we look at the lower levels of the atmosphere, you can see clearly the ridge is strengthening now there as well. So we're talking about how the upper levels are where the ridge was, the lower levels was where the weakness was that would allow it to shoot up north with this front. What's going to happen is there's still enough weakness for this to shoot up north right now, but the ridge is strengthening a lot unexpectedly. And if it continued to do that, this would be headed way farther west. I still think a shift north is going to occur, but the stronger this gets right now, the later that's going to happen. So it's really interesting to see right now the general trend that this could take getting farther and farther west as weakness continues to really diminish where we were really expecting this to go. The ridge is just far stronger, and Barry is starting to wrap up and tighten up. I mean, we're getting the most bizarre, I guess, combination of scenarios you could get. Originally, we said either it was going to be strong ridge, farther south storm that would move farther west. We saw it go farther north, weaker ridge, farther north center from the GFS, head as far south as the Euro was saying. And now we're seeing it head farther north than it needed to in order to head farther west, yet it's heading farther west because of a stronger ridge than expected. There's so many minor inaccuracies that are just really screwing up such a major forecast, if that makes sense, because minor features are what's going to affect the storm majorly, because this is a more complicated system. This is a more complicated steering pattern.
Update has just come out here, and it is now still at 65 miles per hour and 993 millibars. What's your first reaction to that?
I'm starting to think that's wrong. I'm going to say that's objectively wrong. I saw the reason before. It's obviously stronger. It's painfully obvious that it's stronger at this point.
So
and
that is breaking news. I'm sorry, I just want to reiterate the National Hurricane Center have come out with their latest advisory, still at 65 miles per hour, pressure of 993. There are no changes in the warnings at 9 a.m. UTC. That is 4 a.m. Central Time. Just to read out their headline: rain bands of Barry beginning to move on shore, dangerous storm surge, heavy rains and wind conditions expected across the north central Gulf Coast. They're saying now movement west-northwest at 5 miles per hour rather than 3 as it was earlier. But Thomas, if you look at the satellite imagery again, last hour we were talking about this float that was just beginning, and look how big it is now.
Yes.
When you say it has winds of 65 at this point, at least to me, seems like an underestimation. I mean, I don't know, because we don't have access to recon aircraft data, so they may have access to it. But as of right now, I'm not seeing much reason for it. I'm going to dive into the forecast discussion and see if I find anything. But until then, Nelson, it looks like you do have a power outage map here ready to go.
Let's just get that here on the screen. There we are.
Nathan, could they update in their next intermediate?
They could.
Advice?
I've got the discussion here, actually. They're actually going with recent ASCAP passes and a Dvorak classification from TAFB. Doppler radar velocities they acknowledge between 10 and 12,000 feet show winds of 60 to 67 knots. But based on surface observations, that might not be mixing down to the surface. As we know, recon hurricane hunters aren't in the storm until around 3 hours from now. I think Nelson's trying to speak. I think we've been struggling. Try again. I'm not getting anything here. But you can certainly see anyway on the map there. I assume I assume the red areas are where the power is out.
Yes, Nathan, I do apologize for that. The red areas are where the power's out. Montagut, Chauvin, Homa has a lot of power outages. If we go by parish, Jefferson, 8,241. In these areas, especially these areas near where the closest to the center of circulation is, no. Pierre Part, being as far inland as it is, I'm a little surprised by. Donaldsonville is just across from Baton Rouge. It's not that far away from Baton Rouge. I'm a little surprised by that. Jean Lafitte and Barataria, Lafitte, not surprised by that. These are overhead power lines supported by one pole. A large gust, it takes down one transformer, it takes down them all. I am a little, besides these areas here, Chauvin, Dulac, Montagut, up to Schriever, which is near Homa and Thibodaux, we do see power outages. Luling, Destrehan, we aren't even to New Orleans International Airport yet, which is over here. But what's most interesting here, and I'm a little concerned by it, is this red area right here. Because I live at this corner that my mouse is pointing to, and I'm not without power.
Oh my.
So we do give this map a little skepticism. If I drop out suddenly, it's because it's a very slow breakage to my house. But the fact of the matter is, the place near the shore, as you see, we've talked about how Louisiana is a lot of marshland, a lot of swampland. If we zoom in, these areas of land are not very large where you see the mouse pointed to. There are lakes, there are bays, there are estuaries. Grand Isle, we've talked about, has been out of power for hours. Up through Galliano, it's going well. La Rose, going well. Lockport, Raceland, going well. But as you move into, hey, look at this. More water, less area to break the wind. We're talking Chauvin, Montagut. But the fact of the matter is, currently 42,472 energy customers without power, 10,500 roughly in Terrebonne Parish, 1,600 to nearly 1,700 in St. Charles Parish, 3,500 in Orleans Parish, which is the city of New Orleans. Again, I would question that because I live in the city of New Orleans and it says my power is out, but I'm still here. And nearly 8,500 in Jefferson Parish. East Baton Rouge Parish itself, 2,770. Baton Rouge all the way up here on the river, wow. Most of those being around Donaldsonville. It's a fluid situation, obviously, but power is starting to fail across the state.
All right, we'll keep ourselves up to date on that one. Could we also have a reminder of places that have been evacuated, if possible?
Grand Isle was evacuated, Lower Plaquemines Parish, Lower Jefferson Parish, and I'm going to use the Entergy map again, and I do apologize just because yeah, because it's the one that's up in Discord. Have to do it that way. Let me zoom out. All right, so this prebescence into the Gulf, essentially, is Plaquemines Parish. Lower Plaquemines Parish has been evacuated since yesterday at about noon. Pretty much everything north of Port Sulphur here. Grand Isle was evacuated at about the same time, though a lot of people did stay. They're kind of veterans of storms. They have to make their own decisions about it. I wouldn't recommend staying on a spit of land like that surrounded by water. But houses are elevated. As I showed you, Nathan, I showed you some pictures near the New Orleans Lake Shore earlier today that we don't have here. But all those houses on Grand Isle are on stilts, 15, 20-foot stilts. Lower Jefferson Parish, this area around Lafitte, was evacuated. This really green area is Orleans Parish, all the way up to I-10 at the water right here. Orleans Parish and New Orleans as the city share coextensive boundaries. That means everything that's in Orleans Parish is part of the city of New Orleans. The city of New Orleans has asked for voluntary evacuations of areas outside of the levee protection, just as Jefferson has done, Plaquemines has done outside of the mandatory evacuations. But the real mandatory evacuations, Grand Isle and everything south of Port Sulphur.
And these are probably what we would have expected, right? I assume so in any case. Looking back at that latest satellite imagery, Thomas, any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, it's become more clear that if there's a well-established center, it's here, and it looks like that's where it is. Radar indicates this as well. We have a very well-established center, and we do have a very strong eastern side. To me, evidence indicates that this is stronger than 65 miles an hour. I think that this is up to 70 to 75. I mean, I'm seeing evidence to indicate from satellite imagery itself that this is a very strong 70-mile-an-hour tropical storm to a 75-mile-an-hour hurricane.
Quite possibly. Just a note as well, the National Hurricane Center are still expecting a hurricane, although it is not explicitly stated, not explicitly shown on their track map, much like was the case yesterday. So David, how about you?
I think it will be a hurricane. I think it's just a matter of when the NHC makes the announcement. But
I'm just updating the percentage chances now as well. You might be interested to know, New Orleans, the chance of hurricane status, the chance of tropical storm force winds has dropped from 81% 6 hours ago, now down to 66%, which is interesting.
It is quite a drop.
Yes. I was just going to ask that it's gaining more moisture.
Well, it looks that way. I'm just changing these percentages right now as well. They'll appear on the left-hand side soon. Lake Charles was 67% chance of tropical storm force winds 6 hours ago. It's now 91%. And Cameron, Louisiana was 68%, now 92%.
So you can definitely see a westward shift here in tracks.
And Thomas, that's due to what you said about winching.
And this one, even in Texas, Port Arthur was 25%, is now up to 49% chance of tropical storm force winds.
Nathan, would you suspect that chance is due to winds from the north as the system starts to spin around? Or do you think that the lower levels will draw winds from the north before it spins around? because I see on the infrared a system that was very ugly earlier is looking more comma shaped and looking more like a very weak tropical system. I think it's going to be a hurricane very soon, and I don't mean to disparage it, but it is looking more classical as we go along.
Definitely, I've certainly noticed that myself too. I think I'm not really sure. I would say it's down to the storm moving more west than the National Hurricane Center have been expecting, which really opens up that window. There's, especially with its slower movement as well. It's interesting when they expect the landfall, though. When is that? Hold on a minute. I'm just checking again. The landfall time, they're expecting it to occur by about lunchtime.
Yep, that's what I was citing on social media. And Nathan and Nelson, power outages in the Louisiana area, they're up over 30,000.
30,000.
Yeah, I did drop out during my report, but I could confirm nearly 44,000 at the time I was talking about them.
All right, 44,000. I'm guessing all of that tornado stuff that we had near the beginning is no longer a threat.
I think one was cancelled.
Because we didn't hear anything more about it, did we?
I would say that, there aren't any tornado warnings at this time. I'd still say there's a tornado threat, and there will be. I was
just talking about that immediate one.
Yeah, that threat seems to be gone.
All right, well, we're really just taking stock with that latest National Hurricane Center advisory. Some people shocked that they haven't updated it haven't upgraded it at all. If you do have any comments or questions for us whilst we're on the air, we are staying for some time yet. Who knows how long? But now we're going to get all the break time that we can muster so that we can keep our voices a bit longer. It's coming up to 4 in the morning Central Time. We'll be back with more on Barry, the latest after this.
continues in a moment.
You can follow Force 13's outlets, the website, force13.com, our YouTube page, youtube.com/Force13, on Facebook under the same name, Force13, and our Twitter handle, it's @Force13 if you wish to get in touch. You can also add Force 13 on Skype and my personal account on Discord, Fool13, at extension 9094.